Don't think too much about anyone. Because the moment you give someone too much space in your mind, they start occupying your heart. And once your heart is occupied by people, peace quietly walks out the door. Some of you listening right now are exhausted, not because life is hard, but because you're emotionally invested in people who were never meant to carry your heart. Let me say this gently. Caring is beautiful. Love is beautiful. But overthinking someone, replaying their words, waiting for their messages, adjusting your mood based on their behavior, that is not love. That is emotional captivity. And Islam never came to chain your heart to creation. Before we go deeper, if this kind of reminder brings calm to your soul, take a second and subscribe. This channel exists to help you breathe again, to remind you where peace actually lives. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Here's the truth many of us learn the hard way. People change, feelings shift, attention fades, and when your heart is tied to people, every change feels like a personal earthquake. But Allah never changes. And that's why trusting people with your heart will always feel risky, while trusting Allah never will. I once met a sister who said, "I don't know why I feel so anxious all the time." After listening to her, it became clear. Her happiness depended on how others treated her. One message could lift her. One silence could break her. Her heart was living in other people's hands. And that's a dangerous place for something so precious. Allah did not create your heart to be passed around emotionally. Your heart was designed to rest with Him. People were meant to be part of your journey, not the destination. Think about this. The more you overthink someone, the more power you hand them. Power over your mood, your focus, your peace. And most of the time, they have no idea they're holding it. Protecting your heart doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming conscious. You can love people deeply without drowning in them. You can care without obsession. You can show kindness without self-abandonment. Islam teaches balance, not emotional extremes. When Allah is your anchor, people become additions, not necessities. Their presence becomes a gift, not a requirement for your happiness. And suddenly, disappointment loses its grip. Ask yourself this honestly. Who occupies your thoughts the most? Who do you replay in your mind before you sleep? That's usually where your trust is sitting. And trust belongs first with Allah. When you trust Allah with your heart, something shifts. You stop chasing reassurance. You stop forcing connections. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never meant to understand you. Peace replaces urgency. And here's the beautiful part. When you protect your heart for Allah, He sends people who handle it with care. Not perfectly, but gently. Not possessively, but respectfully. If this message touched something inside you, leave a comment. I want to know, what helps you protect your heart? Your words might be the reminder someone else desperately needs today. And if you know someone who's overthinking, emotionally exhausted, or silently hurting, share this with them. Sometimes one reminder can feel like a lifeline. Remember this as you go. Don't think too much about anyone. Think deeply about Allah, because hearts that trust Him never stay broken for long. Some of the greatest thefts of peace happen quietly. No one announces them. No one warns you. They happen when you begin to care too much about what someone thinks of you, how they feel about you, whether they noticed you, whether you mattered today. At first it feels harmless. You tell yourself it's just concern, just love, just awareness. But slowly, without realizing it, your thoughts start revolving around them. Your mood rises and falls based on their tone. Your heart waits for signals that were never promised. And that's when peace begins to slip away. When you think too much about someone, you start living outside yourself. Your emotional center moves from your own soul to another human being. You replay conversations. You analyze pauses. You search for meaning in silence. And the mind, when left unchecked, always fills the gaps with fear. Overthinking doesn't bring clarity. It breeds insecurity. It turns small moments into heavy burdens, and imagined meanings into emotional wounds. Allah created the heart delicate, not weak. But when you place too much weight on people, even a strong heart becomes tired. People are limited. They have their own struggles, their own moods, their own blind spots. They will disappoint you, not always intentionally, but inevitably. And when your peace is tied to them, every disappointment feels personal, even when it isn't. There is a difference between caring and clinging. Caring allows space. Clinging suffocates the heart. When you think too much about someone, you begin to shrink yourself. You watch your words, you second-guess your reactions. You hold back your truth. Not because it's wrong, but because you're afraid of losing their approval. And slowly, the version of you that feels free, confident, and grounded starts to fade. One of the most exhausting states of the heart is waiting. Waiting for reassurance. Waiting for consistency. Waiting to feel chosen. And the tragedy is that many people wait without realizing they are waiting. They tell themselves they're patient, when in reality they are emotionally suspended. Their heart is not resting, it's hovering. And a hovering heart never feels safe. Allah did not ask you to monitor people. He did not ask you to decode intentions or predict emotions. He asked you to guard your heart. Because a guarded heart is not closed, it is protected. When you protect your heart, you still love, but you love with awareness. You stop giving people access they haven't earned. You stop handing over emotional authority without trust. Thinking too much about someone often means you are seeking something from them that only Allah can give. Security, validation, worth, belonging. And no matter how kind a person is, they were never meant to carry that responsibility. When you place divine expectations on human shoulders, disappointment becomes unavoidable. Peace begins to return when you redirect your focus. When you notice your thoughts drifting towards someone excessively, gently pull them back. Not with guilt, but with intention. Ask yourself why your heart is searching there. What is it craving? Comfort, certainty, love, and turn toward Allah with that same intensity. Speak to Him with the honesty you reserve for your own thoughts. When your heart is anchored in Allah, people no longer control your inner weather. Their presence becomes appreciated, not depended on. Their absence becomes felt, not devastating. You remain emotionally present without being emotionally consumed. Protecting your peace does not mean withdrawing from the world. It means refusing to let the world occupy the space inside you that belongs to Allah alone. Attachment becomes dangerous when it is formed without awareness. At first, it feels comforting to have someone close to your heart, someone whose presence brings warmth and familiarity. But when emotional attachment grows without boundaries, it quietly reshapes the way you think, feel, and respond to life. You begin to rely on a person not just for companionship, but for emotional stability. And that shift, though subtle, carries a heavy cost. Unprotected attachment often starts with good intentions. You open your heart, you trust, you allow yourself to be vulnerable. But without limits, vulnerability turns into dependence. Your sense of calm begins to depend on how available they are, how kind they feel that day, how consistent their attention seems. When they are near, you feel safe. When they pull away even slightly, your chest tightens. The heart was not created to live in constant reaction to another human being. One of the quiet dangers of emotional attachment is how it distorts reality. You start interpreting everything through the lens of that person. Their approval feels like success. Their distance feels like failure. Even neutral actions begin to feel loaded with meaning. You read between lines that were never written. You hear messages in silence that were never spoken. And the mind, fueled by attachment, always assumes the worst before it considers peace. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They are what keep love from turning into fear. When boundaries are missing, attachment grows unchecked, and the heart forgets where it ends, and the other person begins. You stop noticing when you are overextending, overgiving, over-explaining. You call it loyalty, but your soul feels tired. You call it patience, but your heart feels restless. Emotional attachment without boundaries often silences your inner voice. You sense when something feels off, but you dismiss it. You feel discomfort, but you justify it. You lower your expectations, then lower them again, just to preserve the connection. And each time you ignore your intuition, you move further away from yourself. Love was never meant to require self-erasure. There is also a spiritual cost to unchecked attachment. When the heart clings too tightly to creation, it begins to loosen its grip on the Creator, not intentionally, but gradually. Does become focused on people instead of guidance. Worship becomes heavier because the heart is preoccupied. Trust shifts quietly from Allah to outcomes, from divine wisdom to human behavior. Islam teaches connection, not consumption. You are allowed to love deeply, but you are also commanded to protect your heart. Protection does not mean suspicion. It means clarity. It means knowing what belongs to Allah and what belongs to people. Your worth belongs to Allah. Your security belongs to Allah. Your emotional grounding belongs to Allah. When boundaries are present, attachment becomes healthy. You can be close without being consumed. You can care without losing yourself. You can give without emptying your soul. Boundaries remind you that another person is a blessing, not a lifeline. They are a companion on your path, not the source of your stability. Many hearts suffer not because they loved, but because they loved without limits. They mistook intensity for sincerity. They believed constant emotional access meant connection. But real connection respects space. It allows breathing room. It does not demand emotional availability at the expense of peace. When you begin to set boundaries, the heart initially resists. It fears loss. It fears distance. But over time something shifts. The heart becomes calmer. The mind becomes quieter. You stop feeling emotionally exposed all the time. You feel held not by a person, but by a deeper sense of trust. The silent danger of emotional attachment without boundaries is not that people leave, but that you forget how to stand on your own heart. Overthinking people has a way of quietly weakening trust in Allah. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments, in repeated thoughts, in mental loops that seem harmless at first. You replay what someone said. You imagine what they might be thinking. You try to predict what they will do next. And without realizing it, your heart begins to rely on analysis instead of tawakkul. When the mind is busy managing people, it leaves little space for trusting Allah. Overthinking creates the illusion of control. It convinces you that if you think enough, worry enough, prepare enough, you can prevent pain. But control has never belonged to the human mind. It belongs to Allah alone. And the more you attempt to control outcomes through overthinking, the more anxious your heart becomes. Overthinking people often means you are placing too much weight on their role in your life. You begin to believe that their choices determine your future, your peace, your happiness. So you stay mentally alert, constantly evaluating, constantly bracing yourself. This state of emotional vigilance is exhausting. The heart was not created to be on guard all the time. Trust in Allah is not passive. It is active surrender. It is the decision to do your part, then release the outcome. Overthinking, on the other hand, refuses release. It keeps the heart tied to possibilities, especially the painful ones. You imagine conversations that never happen. You anticipate rejection that may never come. And each imagined scenario pulls you further away from reliance on Allah. There is a spiritual imbalance that forms when overthinking takes over. Instead of turning to Allah when uncertainty appears, the mind turns inward. You search for answers in memory, in patterns, in assumptions. Du'as are delayed because the mind is busy solving. Reflection is replaced by rumination. The heart becomes noisy, and in that noise, it becomes harder to hear divine reassurance. Overthinking also weakens trust, because it focuses on creation rather than the Creator. You become more concerned with people's intentions than Allah's wisdom. You try to decode human behavior instead of resting in divine decree. And when people act in ways you don't expect, your heart shakes. Not because the situation is unbearable, but because your trust was misplaced. Allah never asked you to predict people. He asked you to trust Him. He never asked you to understand every outcome. He asked you to believe that He is managing what you cannot see. Overthinking is often a sign that the heart is afraid to let go. Afraid that if it stops thinking, something will fall apart. But what is meant for you will never require mental exhaustion to hold it together. When trust in Allah is strong, the mind softens. You still think, but you don't spiral. You still care, but you don't obsess. You recognize when your thoughts are crossing from reflection into fear. And instead of following them, You redirect them toward remembrance. One of the clearest signs of weakened trust is the inability to rest. Even in moments of stillness, the mind races. Even in prayer, thoughts return to people. This restlessness is not a personality trait. It is a heart searching for safety in the wrong place. Rebuilding trust in Allah begins with awareness. Notice how often your thoughts return to the same person or situation. Notice how much emotional energy is being spent on things outside your control. Then, consciously shift that energy. Speak to Allah about what you are carrying instead of carrying it alone. Letting go of overthinking does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing care with control. It means you accept that Allah sees what you cannot, knows what you do not, and plans with a wisdom that never fails. When the heart learns to trust Allah again, it no longer needs to overthink people to feel safe. Loving people without handing them your heart is one of the most important lessons you can learn, though it often comes through struggle. Many of us confuse love with surrender. We believe that to love deeply, we must give our whole hearts, our peace, and our stability to another person. But love was never meant to require self-erasure. The heart is precious, and giving it away without care can leave you vulnerable in ways that feel permanent, even if the person never intended harm. The first step in understanding this is realizing that people are limited. No matter how kind, loyal, or caring someone is, they are human. They have moods, distractions, and their own priorities. Their presence can be supportive, but it is not guaranteed to be consistent. When you hand your heart fully to someone else, you are giving them power to affect your inner world far beyond what they were ever meant to hold. This is where pain often begins, not from their actions, but from the expectations your heart carried. Loving without handing over your heart means creating a sacred space inside yourself that belongs only to Allah. Your emotional well-being, your sense of self-worth, and your inner peace are not gifts for someone else to manage. When your love is rooted in your own heart first, it becomes an act of giving without dependence. You can care, you can support, and you can be fully present without losing your stability or your voice. One of the challenges of this kind of love is detachment without indifference. It's easy to confuse protecting your heart with shutting down emotionally, but there is a difference. Protecting your heart is conscious. It recognizes limits, sets boundaries, and refuses to let external behavior dictate internal peace. Indifference, on the other hand, is avoidance. It's not love, it's emotional neglect. Loving without giving away your heart requires mindfulness. It asks you to love fully but wisely, to give care without surrendering control over your happiness. Another subtle aspect is learning to recognize the difference between affection and necessity. Many hearts fall into the trap of believing they need someone's attention, validation, or approval to survive emotionally. That kind of attachment is dangerous because it transfers the responsibility of your joy from Allah, who is constant, to someone who is inherently inconsistent. Loving without handing your heart is realizing that a person's presence enhances your life, but does not define it. Their absence does not undo your stability or your faith. It also requires self-awareness. You must notice when your thoughts revolve obsessively around someone. When your day, your mood, or your sleep is influenced by their actions or inactions, that is a signal that your heart may be overextended. Loving wisely means stepping back, reflecting, and choosing where your emotional energy goes. It's about recognizing that your heart is not a possession to be given freely, but a treasure to be safeguarded. The spiritual dimension of this practice cannot be overstated. When you place your heart in the hands of Allah first, people become a source of companionship and support. Rather than the center of your world, you love, but your love is not contingent. You care, but your care does not create dependence. Your peace is anchored in divine wisdom, rather than human behavior. Loving without handing your heart also prepares you for healthier relationships. When your heart is whole, your love is intentional and balanced. You give freely without expecting reciprocity. You remain emotionally present without becoming emotionally dependent. This type of love is resilient. It survives challenges, misunderstandings, and distance because it is anchored in self-respect and divine trust. This approach changes the way you interact with people. You no longer give in desperation. You no longer cling or overanalyze. You no longer seek approval as validation of your worth. Instead, you give love thoughtfully, knowing that your heart is safe, your soul is grounded, and your emotional energy is wisely invested. Choosing Allah as your emotional anchor, rather than leaning on people, is one of the most freeing and transformative practices a heart can learn. From the moment we are young, we are taught to seek comfort in others. A friend's smile, a partner's attention, a family member's approval. These become measures of our emotional safety. And while human connections are beautiful and necessary, placing them at the center of your emotional world often leads to disappointment. People are limited. They change, they forget, they fail. But Allah is constant, unchanging, and perfectly aware of what your heart needs before you even speak it. When your heart relies on others for stability, it becomes reactive. Your mood rises and falls with their presence, their words, and even their absence. You start to live emotionally on the outside rather than the inside. One text message can brighten your entire day, and one silence can ruin it. Your peace is no longer your own. It belongs in small but significant ways to someone else. And when that person falters or drifts, you feel abandoned, even if they never promised to hold your happiness. Turning to Allah as your emotional anchor shifts this entire dynamic. Suddenly, your heart has a permanent resting place. It no longer has to live in constant expectation of human behavior or validation. Allah's presence becomes the source of your certainty, your comfort, and your resilience. This doesn't mean people stop mattering. It doesn't mean you stop loving or appreciating those around you. It means their role changes from necessity to blessing. They are part of your journey, not the foundation of your well-being. The process of anchoring your heart in Allah begins with awareness. Notice when your thoughts spiral after someone's actions or words. Notice when your emotional energy is spent trying to control, predict, or interpret someone else's behavior. Then gently remind yourself that your heart belongs first to Allah. He created it, knows it, and is perfectly capable of holding it when the world feels uncertain. This awareness alone begins to reduce the anxiety that overthinking others creates. Faith transforms love into freedom. When Allah is your anchor, you love people without being dependent on them. You care without surrendering your emotional sovereignty. You give without expecting a return. Your heart can expand to embrace others while remaining rooted in divine certainty. This is the balance that creates emotional peace. One of the most powerful aspects of choosing Allah as your anchor is trust. When you fully trust Him, the small disappointments and inconsistencies of life lose their power to destabilize you. Someone's silence or a broken promise does not shake your heart because your foundation does not depend on them. It rests securely in divine wisdom and mercy. Your trust becomes a shield against the stormy tides of human unpredictability. Another benefit is clarity. Anchoring your heart in Allah allows you to see relationships for what they truly are. You stop expecting people to fill gaps they were never designed to fill. You stop assigning them responsibilities that belong only to the Creator. Your interactions become intentional. Your love becomes conscious, and your decisions become guided by wisdom rather than need. Choosing Allah as your emotional anchor also cultivates patience. You learn to wait for what is right without obsessing over every small signal from others. You learn to respond rather than react. You learn to love fully while keeping your heart protected. This patience is not passive, it is active trust. A daily practice of placing your inner peace above temporary uncertainties. Finally, anchoring in Allah creates resilience. Life will inevitably bring challenges, misunderstandings, and disappointments. But a heart rooted in divine trust is like a tree with deep roots. It bends, it sways, but it does not break. People may leave, circumstances may change, but the peace you have chosen in Allah remains steady. This is the essence of emotional freedom, loving and caring without losing yourself, because your heart has already found its perfect, unshakable home.